You talked of evidence. I also went through the order. Could you just explain to our audiences what evidence is the commission talking about against these two companies?
Sure, the order goes into more detail, of course, but in a nutshell, we find that these two companies have ties to the Chinese Communist Party, as well as China's military apparatus, the People's Liberation Army. In addition to that, Chinese law requires any company subject to Chinese jurisdiction, such as Huawei and ZTE, to comply with requests from the Chinese intelligence services and not to disclose the fact of such requests to any of their companies. And so if you're a small rural telephone company in the United States that has Huawei equipment or services in your network, you may never know that there's been a request from the Chinese intelligence services to install a backdoor, to inject malware, to engage in intellectual property theft and the like using that equipment. That is a risk the United States cannot take, and that the FCC in particular was not willing to tolerate.
What is the scale of the use of equipment from these two companies in the US as of now?
That's a very good question. So under my leadership, we issued what's called an information collection from US telecom companies. We asked them to report to us, what Huawei and ZTE gear do you have in your networks now? We just received that information. So the staff in our Office of Economics and Analytics is going through it as we speak, collecting that. And so I should be able to have more of a judgment on that question in the time to come. But unfortunately, right now, I can't give you a preliminary assessment.
Have you had any contacts with leaders from South Asia in India, Pakistan, Nepal, or Bangladesh on this issue?
I have. So for example, in February, as part of the US delegation to India, where I had a chance to meet with the chairman of the TRAI, Ram Sharma, also Secretary Prakash, I also spoke briefly with the Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, about some of the importance of working together on 5G strategies, because I think that a rising tide raises all boats, and that's certainly the case when it comes to cooperation on telecommunications policy. Generally speaking, my conversations with the government of India have always been very positive. We, of course, it's often been said, share common values as democracies with a longstanding friendship, but especially when it comes to telecom policy, I think we are very much aligned. And so I look forward to continuing to work across the United States government with the government of India on those shared priorities.
How would you react to India banning 59 apps from China? Your thoughts?
It's a very significant move. I noticed that they had issued that order a couple of days ago, and I think it's a reflection of the fact that there's growing concern in India, around South Asia, around the world about the susceptibility of Chinese tech companies, equipment companies to influence from the Chinese Communist Party. And especially when these communications networks, communications platforms are increasingly interconnected, they don't respect national boundaries. It follows from that to the extent that there is a potential compromise at the behest of the Chinese Communist Party, that's a threat to everybody, to the government of India, to all the people of India as well. So I obviously will be following with great interest how that ban proceeds, and look forward to collaborating on issues like that in the future.
What would you tell countries like India on allowing these two companies for 5G trials?
Given the fact that 5G will underlie so many critical aspects of our economy and society, this is not an area where we can simply take a risk and hope for the best, especially given the fact that 5G is now in its nascent stages. Now is the time to embrace that risk-based framework so that you don't end up having insecure equipment and services embedded in your networks and then have to take very expensive, very time-consuming steps to remove and replace that equipment. And certainly the Chinese Communist Party has made clear that it wants to exploit every technological avenue at its disposal in order to secure geostrategic advantage. And that's not something I think that is in the interest of any country, certainly not one like the United States, and I would dare say one like India.